with a daring look, stood his ground. His finger touched Peter's neck. It sent shivers straight to his manhood. He grabbed Peter's hand gently, yet firm, putting them in front of him and pausing. Peter felt safe in that moment. He spoke no words. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Dr. Kelvin went ahead to remove Peter's shirt and kissed his shoulders and ran his lips on the skin close to his ear. He beat Peter gently on his ears and it didn't hurt as Peter moved his body closer to Dr. Kelvin, wanting more. And at that moment, Dr. Kelvin pushed Peter gently onto the sofa chair in his office, guiding Peter into a world of pleasure he never knew existed. Peter James, a 19-year-old with short, neatly trimmed dark hair and a face that showed both youth and quiet determination, walked through the large gates of Bright Future University. His clean-shaven jawline and deep hazel eyes gave him a serious look, one that reflected the strong values he had learned growing up in a Christian home. Wearing a neatly ironed shirt and well-pressed trousers, Peter looked calm and prepared, as though he was already imagining himself in a court one day. At the gate, his parents, Mr. and Mrs. James, stopped to pray with him. His father's voice was steady and kind as he asked for God's guidance over Peter's new journey. Peter's mother, holding back tears of pride, smiled at her son. Peter bowed his head respectfully, moving his lips in silent prayer with them. The moment felt special and important, marking the start of a big step in Peter's life. As he entered the busy campus, Peter's focused and serious attitude made him stand out among the other students, who seemed more relaxed and casual. His eyes moved over the large stone buildings and the green lawns, taking it all in as he mentally prepared for the challenges ahead. During the orientation in the law faculty hall, Peter's calm and attentive behavior caught the attention of the dean. The dean, an older man with years of experience, glanced at Peter during his speech and said, "Bright Future University is proud to support students with great potential. Some of you here will become tomorrow's leaders." Peter felt his face warm with a slight blush, but he stayed composed and gave a small nod to acknowledge the dean's words. After the session ended, a few students whispered about Peter, noticing how confident and well-dressed he seemed, but Peter wasn't paying attention to them. His mind was clear on what mattered most: working hard, excelling in his studies, and staying true to the values his parents had taught him. Every evening, without fail, Taz's mother called him to check in and remind him of the values their family held dear. Her voice was warm but firm as she always spoke. "Peter, remember that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom," she would say, her tone full of care and hope. Peter listened quietly, his phone pressed to his ear as he sat at his small dorm desk. "Yes, Mom," he replied, his voice steady and calm. "I remember. I will still focus. I promise." In class, Peter's seriousness and clean-cut looks didn't go unnoticed. Girls often glanced his way, some whispering about how handsome he was. A few even tried to strike up conversations with him after lectures or lingered near his desk, hoping to catch his attention. But Peter stayed polite and distant, keeping the focus on his studies. When friends teased him about the attention he got, he only smiled and shook his head. "I am here to learn, not to get distracted," he would say, brushing off the comment. Deep down, he knew his parents were counting on him to stay on the right track, and he didn't want to disappoint them or himself. In the second semester, Peter met David, a lively and confident student who was the complete opposite of him. David was known for his bold fashion choices, bright shirts, ripped jeans, and a silver chain that always caught the light. He had a carefree attitude that made him popular with everyone, and his booming laughter could often be heard echoing through the halls. Peter first noticed David during a group discussion in class. David spoke with ease and humor, his hands gesturing as he made everyone laugh. Peter couldn't help but be intrigued by him. He admired how David seemed so comfortable in his own skin, something Peter often struggled with. When David casually invited him to hang out after class, Peter hesitated but eventually said yes. Their friendship started with small things, grabbing coffee, sitting together during lunch, or walking around campus. David had a way of making the simplest moments feel exciting. He would nudge Peter playfully during conversations or rest his hand briefly on Peter's shoulder when making a point. Peter noticed these small touches and liked the warmth they brought, though he told himself it was just how David was, friendly and open with everyone. Peter began to admire David more than he realized. He liked how David's smile could light up a room and how his voice carried a confidence that made people stop and listen. David encouraged Peter to loosen up, joking that he was too serious for his own good. "You know, Peter," David said one evening as they sat on a bench under the soft glow of campus lights, "you've got to let yourself have fun sometimes. Life's not all about rules and academics." Peter chuckled, feeling a strange mix of nerves and comfort as David leaned in closer, their shoulders brushing. "I know," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I am working on it." Peter didn't think much about why he felt drawn to David, why he enjoyed their time together so much, or why those brief touches stayed in his mind. To him, it was just part of their growing friendship, normal and nothing more. But deep down, he couldn't deny how much he looked forward to every moment they spent together. One Friday evening, David leaned against Peter's desk with his usual easy grin. "Come on, Peter, just one party. You have been studying too much. It's just a little fun break. You deserve it." Peter hesitated, his fingers fiddling with the edge of his notebook. He knew his parents wouldn't approve, but the idea of doing something outside his rigid routine felt strangely tempting. After a long pause, he nodded. "All right, but I'll have to tell my parents I have night classes." David laughed. "That's the spirit. Don't worry. You will thank me for this." That evening, Peter followed David to a part of town he had never visited before. As they approached the club, he noticed bright neon lights flashing and music thumping from inside. The energy was electric, and Peter felt both curious and uneasy. When they entered, he froze, his eyes widening at the sight before him. The room was packed with people, dancing under colorful strobe lights, the air thick with the sound of pulsing music. But what shocked Peter the most was that it wasn't like any other party he had imagined. It was a gay club. Shirtless men moved confidently on the dance floor, their bodies glistening under the lights. Some were laughing, holding hands, others kissing openly, and a few making out in dark corners. The scene felt like a world away from the life Peter knew. Peter's heart raced as he tried to take it all in. He felt out of place, his shirt buttoned up to the collar and his shoe polished. The energy of the room was overwhelming, but what caught him off guard even more was how his body reacted. He felt warm, his face flushing as he watched the carefree movement of the dancers. A strange sensation stirred within him, what he didn't quite understand but couldn't ignore. David noticed his wide-eyed expression and laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Relax, Peter. You look like you have just seen a ghost. This is just a party. People having fun. Loosen up." Peter swallowed hard, his voice shaking. I didn't know. I didn't expect," David grinned, nudging him playfully. "You are fine. No one is judging you here. Just have fun." But Peter didn't feel fine. His hands felt clammy and his chest tightened as he glanced around, unsure of where to look. He couldn't believe he was in a place like this, seeing things he had never imagined. And yet, deep down, he couldn't deny a confusing mix of discomfort and fascination. Few weeks later, Dr. Kelvin, a charismatic law lecturer known for his sharp mind and confident presence, began noticing Peter in a way that was more than just academics. From the very first lecture, Peter's focus and intelligence stood out. His answers were thoughtful, and his passion for law was clear. Dr. Kelvin couldn't help but be impressed, and he found himself keeping a closer eye on Peter as the weeks passed. After class one day, Dr. Kelvin approached Peter, his usual smile wider than normal. "Mr. James," he said, his voice low and smooth, "your contribution in class today were excellent. I can see you are really grasping the material. It is not something I see in most first-year students." Peter felt a little taken aback, but smiled politely. "Thank you, sir. I am trying to keep up." Dr. Kelvin's gaze lingered a moment longer than necessary. "I am sure you are doing more than just keep it up. You are excelling," he said, his tone almost personal. "In fact, I would like to offer you some extra guidance. You have a unique potential. We should meet outside of class to go over some of the more advanced concepts." Peter wasn't sure how to respond, but he nodded, grateful for the attention. "That sounds great, sir. I would appreciate the extra help." From then on, their meetings became more frequent. At first, they were just discussions about the course materials, but Dr. Kelvin's comments began to shift, becoming more personal and focused on Peter himself. "You have a sharp mind, Peter," Dr. Kelvin would say, his voice smooth and encouraging, but with an edge that Peter couldn't understand or ignore. "It is not just your academic work that impresses me. You have a certain presence about you." Peter would blush slightly, unsure how to react. He had never been the center of this kind of attention before. Dr. Kelvin's compliments felt good, but there was something in the way he looked at him, something that made Peter feel both flattered and uneasy. During one meeting, as they discussed a difficult case study, Dr. Kelvin leaned in just a little closer, his voice softer. "I have been following your work closely, Peter. You are one of the brightest students I have had in years." He paused, his eyes scanning Peter's face with an intensity that made Peter's stomach tighten. "And you know, it's not just your mind that stands out. You are also a very handsome young man, and you have a sexy body too, if you don't mind me saying." Peter felt his heart race, unsure how to respond. He had always admired Dr. Kelvin's intelligence, but now his words and the way he was looking at him made Peter feel exposed, as if he was being seen in a way he wasn't used to. "I appreciate that, sir," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Kelvin smiled, a glint of something in his eyes. "You should. You deserve to be noticed, and I think we will be very good acquaintances if you don't mind." His voice dropped lower, his gaze moving to Peter's lips for a brief moment before he caught himself. Peter felt a knot form in his stomach, his body reacting in ways he didn't fully understand. He quickly turned away, trying to focus on the work in front of him. But in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the strange feeling that Dr. Kelvin's attention was something entirely different than usual. David noticed Peter's discomfort one day after class, and he asked what the problem was. Peter went on to confide in David. David laughed hard at his innocence and asked him how he felt. Peter, who was confused, told David that he felt excited when close to Dr. Kelvin and that he could feel his manhood getting hard in that moment, but he felt guilty for harboring such feelings as it was against his teaching. David, however, brushed away his concerns and advised him to explore his feeling. Life is too short to hold back. After all, no one is going to know, and if it didn't work out, he could end it and move on. Peter began to question his values and curiosity. Weeks later, Peter waited till it was evening when he visited Dr. Kelvin's office. The lecturer, after weeks of self-reflection, finally made a move. He slowly went over to Peter, giving him time to stop or dash out his office. However, Peter, with a daring look, stood his ground. His finger touched Peter's neck. It sent shivers straight to his manhood. He grabbed Peter's hand gently, yet firm, putting them in front of him and pausing. Peter felt safe in that moment. He spoke no words. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Dr. Kelvin went ahead to remove Peter's shirt and kissed his shoulders and ran his lips on the skin close to his ear. He beat Peter gently on his ears, and it didn't hurt as Peter moved his body closer to Dr. Kelvin, wanting more. And at that moment, Dr. Kelvin pushed Peter gently onto the sofa chair in his office, guiding Peter into a world of pleasure he never knew existed. Days later, after his encounter with Dr. Kelvin, Peter's emotions became awoken. He became obsessed with the lecturer, started seeking online knowledge from sites that would help him sexually satisfy Dr. Kelvin. He also looked for ways to see Dr. Kelvin in order to satisfy his newfound desire and urge. Dr. Kelvin did not mind as long as he enjoyed his affair with Peter. They would meet after school at hotels far from the school where no one would recognize them. However, Peter's focus on his studies began to waver. He began to skip classes and avoided assignments, prioritizing his secret relationship. His once stellar academic record began to slip. Even David noticed Peter's obsession with Dr. Kelvin. He tried advising Peter, but Peter told him not to worry as he was careful enough. Rumors about Peter and Dr. Kelvin started circulating amongst students and staff. Peter's frequent visit to Dr. Kelvin's office didn't go unnoticed, and whispers of an inappropriate relationship spread like wildfire. Dr. Kelvin, realizing the risk to his reputation and Peter's clinginess to him, became so bored of his affair with Peter. He decided to end the affair by telling him on the phone. Peter was devastated, unable to comprehend the rejection. He pleaded and professed his love to Dr. Kelvin, but the reply he got was, "You meant nothing to me." Days later, in a fit of rage, Peter confronted Dr. Kelvin in a public space. Their argument was overheard, so they defined rumors. This resulted in the university administration investigating the affair. During the investigation, Peter's involvement with Dr. Kelvin came to light. Peter, emotional and hurt, inadvertently exposed details of their relationship so as to get back at Dr. Kelvin. The university went ahead to expel Peter for violating the institution's moral code. Dr. Kelvin's influence ensured he was merely transferred to another university, escaping severe consequences. When Peter sought solace from David, his friend denied any involvement with him, distancing himself to protect his own reputation and secret as gay. Peter felt utterly abandoned as he started his journey back home to his parents, who had so much faith in him and his academics, and most importantly, a different version of Peter they would never have imagined.
Much for staying tuned till now. If you have watched up till this moment, I want to say a very big thank you to all who has pressed the subscribe button. Please do well to also press on the notification bell so you are aware when next I will be posting my next story. And until next time, bye bye.